This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. A new report says if women farmers had the same rights as men, more could be done to reduce world hunger. The report, Empowering Women in Agriculture, is from the anti-hunger group Bread for the World. Bread for the World says equal access to agricultural resources would help increase food security and economic growth. Faustine Wabwiri is the group's foreign assistance specialist. She says women constitute half of the agricultural labor force in not just Africa, but the developing countries as a whole. And when you think of Africa alone, she says, it's more than 60% of the total agricultural labor force being provided by women. The report says in most countries, women working in rural areas are more likely than men to hold seasonal, part-time, and low-wage jobs. They also receive less pay for the same work. Ms. Wabwiri says women farmers often cannot get seeds, fertilizer, proper tools, credit, and especially land. She says in most of Africa, about 80% of the population is living in rural areas, and they subsist on agriculture. Women make up 60% of the agricultural labor force, and yet they lack access to resources, she says. She says land is one good example. Less than 20% of all landholders are women. This is often because of legal as well as cultural reasons. She says women who have lost their husbands may have no legal rights over their land. The only way to keep the land, she says, is to marry, say, the brother of the dead husband. Restrictions like these, she says, continue to impede women's ability to fully enjoy their human rights. However, Ms. Wabwiri says women in agriculture are getting more attention these days. For example, Kenya's new constitution gives women the right to own land. But she says there is still a long way to go. Bread for the World is urging the United States government to increase development assistance, or at least not to decrease it. She says Feed the Future, the U.S. government's agriculture aid program, is helping to elevate the status of women. But Ms. Wabwiri says more African governments must recognize the major role that women play in agriculture and elsewhere. Just how much could hunger be reduced if women had equal access to agricultural resources? The report estimates that hunger could be reduced for an extra 100 to 150 million people. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Chicken feathers are useful, and not just to a chicken. Some go into pillows, coats, and other products. But countless chicken feathers go to waste. In the United States, billions of chickens are produced yearly. Most of their feathers are thrown away. But instead of being buried in landfills, some feathers could find a future in plastics. Scientists in the Washington area have been working with keratin, the main substance in poultry feathers. One of the products they have developed is a flower pot. It may look like other flower pots, but the container breaks down in the earth within 1 to 5 years. And as it breaks down, it naturally releases nitrogen into the soil. The flower pots are made by reducing chicken feathers to a powder. Then, the powder is formed into pellets and shaped into pots. The environmentally friendly flower pot is the work of two researchers. Walter Schmidt is with the Agricultural Research Service, part of the United States Agriculture Department. Masoud Huda is with the Horticultural Research Institute, a private organization. The Institute's research director, Mark Tefo, says the flower pot works well for vegetables and small flowering plants like geraniums and impatiens. Walter Schmidt has been working to find uses for chicken feathers since the 1990s. Progress in 2002 showed that plastic made from feathers could be formed like other plastics. He says feathers are much stronger and last longer than another plant material, cellulose. He says feathers are about 8 times as strong as cellulose. He points out that traditional flower pots made from petroleum-based plastics can last much longer, but he wonders if there is really a need. He says most flower pots are never reused. He says, why would you want a plastic that you use for a year to last for 200 years? It makes no sense. You want to match the product with the use. Walter Schmidt and Masoud Huda are now adding another chicken product to their flower pots, chicken waste. The waste will add more nutrients to the soil as the pot breaks down. The scientists say they hope their flower pot will be on the market in a year or two. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. You can find transcripts, MP3s, podcasts, and archives of our reports at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. In 2008, scientists reported on a study of cotton grown in 6 provinces in northern China. The study involved bollworms, a major threat to cotton farmers. It also involved Bt cotton, a plant genetically engineered to resist that threat. Bt cotton plants naturally kill bollworms. As a result, the study in China found that the cotton plants could also help protect nearby crops against damage by the insects. Now, several researchers involved in that study have published another report in the same journal, Science. They studied the same farmlands again and confirmed the findings about bollworms. But they also found something else. They say another kind of bug is now attacking the cotton and other crops. The study reported on mirid populations between 1997 and 2008. The researchers also documented the use of insecticide chemicals by the Chinese farmers from 1992 to 2008. Kongming Wu of the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences in Beijing took part in both studies. He says mirids are destroying crops, including cotton, apples, pears, peaches, and vegetables. He says this is happening where mirids never before were a problem. The report says the bugs invaded after farmers decreased their use of insecticides by planting Bt cotton. The scientists say their research shows that the Bt cotton has become a source of mirids. They say the population increases are related to drops in insecticide use on the cotton crop. The genetically engineered cotton is designed to help farmers save money by decreasing the need for poisons. But the scientists say the Chinese farmers have now had to use more insecticides to fight the mirids. Bt is a bacterium that was discovered in the early 20th century. Farmers started using it as a natural way to kill insects. Then scientists learned how to put a Bt gene into cotton plants. Much of the cotton grown in northern China is a Bt variety made by Monsanto. Different companies produce Bt cotton. Around the world, farmers grow an estimated 16 million hectares of Bt cotton. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Tell us about a time when you have tried to solve one problem, but unexpectedly produced another. Share your comments at voaspecialenglish.com or on our Facebook page at VOA Learning English.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. To walk the talk means to keep your promises, to do what you said you would do. Walk the Talk is also the name of a new report by the International Food Policy Research Institute. The group says there has been a lot of talk about fighting hunger, but not enough action. As a result, it says the international community could fall far short of the goal of cutting the number of hungry people in half by 2015. The report says an estimated 870 million people were hungry last year. 2 billion did not get enough micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. Shagan Fan is the Institute's Director General. He described 2012 as a mixed year for progress against hunger. He says African countries, India, China, and Brazil continue to invest in agriculture. Donor agencies, he says, including the World Bank and USAID, have also increased their investment in food security and nutrition. But he says a lack of political will limited progress on food security. After the food crisis in 2008 and 2009, many promises were made to increase investment in smallholder agriculture. These small farms are often headed by women. Shagan Fan says not all those promises have been kept. Supporters of greater agricultural investment in poor countries have often criticized farm support programs in rich nations. They say subsidies hurt food production and sales in developing countries. Now, many countries, including India and China, are also turning to subsidies. Shagan Fan says that needs to change. He says it's time the international community walked the talk on food security. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. An international group has set the limit for the 2011 catch of bluefin tuna in the eastern Atlantic and Mediterranean Sea. The limit is just under 13,000 metric tons. That is 600 tons less than the 2010 quota, a reduction of 4%. Conservation groups criticized the move, saying the cut is not big enough to support the recovery of bluefin tuna in the Mediterranean. The International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas set the catch in November in Paris. Delegates to the Commission represent the governments of 48 fishing nations. In 2006, the Commission established a plan to stop overfishing. The goal is to rebuild bluefin populations in the eastern Atlantic and the Mediterranean by 2022. The European Commission had called for reducing the catch in 2011 to 6,000 tons to improve the chances for the huge and highly valuable fish. But Mediterranean members of the European Union rejected that proposal even before the 10-day meeting began. Still, EU Fisheries Commissioner Maria Damanaki said the meeting took a step in the right direction for sustainable management of bluefin tuna. The fishing industry wanted to keep the existing catch limit. Atlantic bluefin can grow 3 meters long and weigh as much as 650 kilograms. France, Italy, and Spain catch most of the Atlantic bluefin eaten in the world. Most of the catch goes to Japan. Japan called for stronger action against illegal fishing and underreporting of bluefin catches. Conservation activists say the eastern Atlantic has only about 1/4 as many bluefin tuna as it did in the 1950s. And the population in the western Atlantic has dropped by more than 80% since 1970. Environmental groups say illegal fishing and underreporting might mean there are even fewer bluefin than estimates suggest. The Center for Biological Diversity, an activist group, recently launched a boycott of the prized fish. It says thousands of people around the world have signed a promise not to eat bluefin tuna or spend money at sushi restaurants that still serve it. Susan Lieberman of the Pew Environment Group in Washington says people should care what happens to fish that are important to the environment of the sea. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Afghan farmers are expecting another big harvest this year, but officials at the United Nations and around the world see no reason to celebrate. The crop is opium. Farmers have been busy harvesting their opium poppies. One farmer in Helmand province says wheat and corn bring too little income. He says people in Helmand cannot feed themselves by growing food crops. A report by the UN Office on Drugs and Crime warns that Afghanistan could supply as much as 90% of the world's heroin. The report says opium production is especially high in the most unstable areas of Afghanistan. These are areas where the surge increase in American troops helped beat back Taliban influence. The report says insurgents used the insecurity in areas like Helmand and Kandahar province as a chance to win popular support. They also assisted opium farmers with their crops. The UN says poor weather and crop disease led to a reduction in the supply of opium last year, which drove up prices. The higher price of opium makes more farmers want to grow poppies. The UN says this is the third year in a row that opium poppy growing has increased in Afghanistan. A UN special advisor on drug issues says the huge opium crop is a sign of failure. He adds that while farmers are dependent on the income from opium, 1 million people in the country are addicted to the drug. The increase in production follows gains made by the government during years of effort to reduce the drug trade. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Climate researchers met recently in Cameroon to talk about threats to Africa's land and animals. They said they believe the continent may lose as much as 30% of its animal and plant species by the end of this century. They blame the losses on the warming of the earth, population growth, and unrestricted development. The researchers represent 20 African, American, and European universities. They say countries south of the Sahara Desert are losing forest faster than any place on Earth. Wood companies are cutting down trees to meet growing demand from China, Europe, and the United States. The population is growing 3% each year. There are now homes, factories, and farms on land that once was forest. Many African animals and plants no longer have a place to live as a result. Climate change also continues to threaten species. Thomas Smith is with the University of California. He says Africa may lose 40% of its mammal species because of expected rises in temperatures. The African chimpanzee is among the mammals at risk. Mary Catherine Gonder is a professor at Drexel University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She studies chimpanzees in the Congo Basin. She says their forest home is disappearing. She also says hunters continue to kill the animals to sell as food. The researchers say it is important to develop environmentally friendly economies. The Congo Basin area of Western and Central Africa has the second largest equatorial rainforest in the world. It is important to the lives of millions of people. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. A movie from Cameroon called The Big Banana has come to the United States. It looks at issues with the banana industry, like disputed land rights, food insecurity, and pollution. One Cameroonian woman in the film says the land belongs to local villagers, and they are asking operators of banana plantations to give it back. Frank Ameni Bialu directed the documentary film. He says officials prevented a showing in Yaoundé, the capital. He says making the movie was difficult and even led to his brief detention. I got arrested because the chief of that part of the village did not want me to film because he is being paid by the banana company. You understand, the thing is, everything around that area is controlled by the company. If you look at the congressman of the region, he is also the director of public relations of the company. The Minister of Trade of Cameroon is also president of the board of directors of the company. The company, Plantation du Haut-Panja, is French and American owned. Representatives would not talk to the filmmakers. The company and Cameroonian officials did not answer a request for a VOA interview. Mr. Bialu says large parts of fertile land in Cameroon are being used for banana exports. As a result, local residents have more and more difficulty growing their own food or finding food to buy. Also, the use of pesticide chemicals is blamed for polluting water and causing health problems. Villagers accuse the company of destroying their fields to expand the banana plantations after getting land leases from the government. Mr. Bialu says the problem exists across Africa as foreigners increasingly invest in agricultural land. He says government corruption is stronger than the people's traditional rights to the land. When a company arrives and just shows the money, the big cash, what happens is the government just gives them the land that they want, and these people cannot defend themselves because they do not have any rights on that land. Amira Woods, from the American-based Institute for Policy Studies, helped organize the showing of The Big Banana. She says, because of threats from multinational corporations, from sovereign wealth funds, whether it is Saudi Arabia or Iran, the list is actually growing of countries that are looking to Africa as a source of access to land when arable land is becoming much more scarce on this planet. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Teff is a common part of the diet in Ethiopia and other parts of Africa. This nutritious grain is very small. It has a mild, nutty taste. People use teff flour to make bread and other foods. Now, teff is finding new uses in foods for people with celiac disease. People with celiac disease cannot process gluten. Gluten is a protein in wheat, rye, and barley. Glutens can be found not just in foods, but also medicines and other products. The immune system is supposed to protect the body, but celiac causes the immune system to damage the small intestine. The disease can cause stomach pains, bloating, and diarrhea. It can also cause weight loss and make people feel continually hungry. It interferes with the body's ability to absorb nutrients from food. In the past, celiac disease was considered rare and limited mostly to people of European ancestry. The rate of reported cases was 1 in 10,000 people. Today, the estimate is about 1 in 133 Americans. But celiac researcher Alessio Fasano says until recent years, not much was known about the disease. Dr. Fasano says studies show that the disease affects about the same percentage of the general public worldwide. That is about 1%. So it is not rare at all. Dr. Fasano directs the Center for Celiac Research at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. He says the disease can be very mild, but more serious cases can interfere with a child's growth. Adults can suffer liver damage, joint pain, and other problems. The main way to control the disease is to avoid glutens. There is a growing market for products that are gluten-free. Farmers in Nevada grow about half the teff produced in the United States. The crop is currently worth only about $1 million to farmers in that state. But teff grower David Eckert is hopeful. He says the market for gluten-free foods is going to be big. Some people without celiac disease say they feel better when they avoid gluten. But many scientists question if this is really true. 7 years ago, Anna Quigg was surprised to learn that she has celiac disease. She says gluten-free products are much easier to find these days. She buys teff and other whole grains. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Transcripts and MP3s of our reports are at voaspecialenglish.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. 20 years ago, when the Soviet Union collapsed, so did beef production in Russia. Breeding and management programs for beef cattle fell apart. Today, Russia imports much of its beef. Cattle are raised mostly for dairy. Instead of beef, Russians have expanded poultry and pork operations. These are faster and less costly to start. But there is some new investment in beef production. And one of those involved is an American rancher and cowboy named Darrell Stevenson. He sees plenty of room for growth. Russia's beef herd is less than 1% the size of the American herd. He says there is tremendous opportunity in Russia in terms of resources and available ground. In late 2010, Darrell Stevenson began sending cows, bulls, horses, and equipment to Russia. He sent more than 1,400 animals. About a third of them traveled by ship. The others came by plane. Mr. Stevenson has 2 Russian partners in what they call the Stevenson-Sputnik ranch. The ranch is located on almost 6,000 hectares of land in Voronezh, in the Black Earth area of southern Russia. The Angus and Hereford cattle came from ranchers in his home state of Montana. The imported cows have given birth to their first calves. He says, "We are helping establish a local beef herd, a regional beef herd, and eventually a national beef herd." Yekaterina Zumina grew up in St. Petersburg and trained as a veterinarian. She worked last year on Darrell Stevenson's ranch in Montana to learn American methods. She says Russians have a lot of experience with dairy cows in barns, but not with beef cattle on open rangeland. She says it is really, really hard to find good enough people in Russia that can work with beef cattle, because Russia is world known as dairy country. We have lots of dairy herds, dairy cows, but managing dairy and beef cows is a totally different thing. Darrell Stevenson is not the only American involved in projects to build a high-quality beef herd in Russia. Reaching that goal will take time and a lot more cows. But Ms. Zumina says the ranch in Voronezh can help show Russians that cowboys really exist. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Persutti. You can download MP3s of our stories and do English teaching activities at voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. People who do not get enough vitamin A in their diet may develop night blindness. But in the developing world, a lack of vitamin A causes much more serious harm to children. The World Health Organization links vitamin A deficiency to as many as 250,000 child deaths every year. One excellent source of vitamin A is found in sweet potatoes with orange flesh. Orange sweet potatoes contain high levels of beta-carotene, which the body changes into vitamin A. Experts say orange sweet potatoes, specially bred for growing conditions in Africa, could help solve the lack of vitamin A there. But first, more people will need to be persuaded to eat them. Jan Lowe, with the International Potato Center, a research organization, says the sweet potato needs a better image in Africa. She said, "We do have an image problem with sweet potato in general in sub-Saharan Africa. It is seen as a crop of the poor." Ms. Lowe explains that sweet potatoes are mainly grown by poor women to feed their families in case another crop fails. The sweet potatoes commonly grown in Africa have white or yellow flesh, but they are low in vitamin A. Jan Lowe took part in a project to study how best to market orange sweet potatoes to Africans. She worked on an information campaign in Mozambique and Uganda. The campaign included radio messages about the nutritional benefits of the orange sweet potato. They advertised its ability to fight diseases, make you strong, clear your skin, and make you look healthy. In areas without radio, the campaigners spread the message through community theater. The performances included singing, dancing, and storytelling. And everywhere they went, the campaigners wore orange t-shirts and hats. They even drove orange vehicles. Jan Lowe says the color of the tuber made it easier to gain public attention. Dan Gustafson heads the Washington office of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. He points to efforts in the past to increase the popularity of other nutritious crops. He says most of these efforts failed because organizers of the campaigns did not consider what people wanted to eat. But Mr. Gustafson sees a better chance for the efforts to increase the popularity of the orange sweet potato in Africa. For one thing, except for the color, the vegetable is similar to what people already use. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Some people say broccoli looks like small trees and cauliflower like gathered clouds. They think broccoli is only green and cauliflower is only white. But these nutritious vegetables also come in more colorful versions. One kind of cauliflower, for example, is orange, and broccoli can be purple. Broccoli and cauliflower are among the most nutritious vegetables. They are high in vitamin C, fiber, and other nutrients. And they contain substances that are believed to fight cancer. They belong to the cabbage or cole family. Other members include cabbage, collards, Brussels sprouts, kale, and kohlrabi. Agriculture experts at the Ohio State University Extension say broccoli and cauliflower grow best in cooler climates. They suggest planting them where the average daily temperature is between 18 and 26 degrees Celsius. Both crops grow best in sunshine and fertile, moist soil, but water should not be standing on the soil. Using mulch helps keep the ground moist and cool. Mulch also helps feed the soil and controls weeds. Broccoli and cauliflower can grow outdoors from seed or as small plants. Vincent Fritz of the University of Minnesota Extension suggests that results are far better with small plants. He says the vegetables should be planted so that they can be harvested before the hottest weather. Experts differ about how to space the plantings in the ground. One suggestion is to plant them in rows about 3/4 of a meter to nearly 1 meter apart. Then place broccoli plants about 20 to 30 centimeters apart in the rows. Set cauliflower plants 38 to about 46 centimeters from each other in the rows. As it grows, a cauliflower plant will start to form a head. The head contains flower buds that are tightly closed and at least 2 leaves wrapping it. Gather and tie the leaves over the head and do not wait for the buds to separate before harvesting. Harvest the center flower bud cluster of broccoli when it reaches the size you want and while the buds are still tightly together. Cut the main stem about 12 to 15 centimeters below the head. You can eat broccoli and cauliflower raw, Or you can steam them in a small amount of water, or stir-fry them in a small amount of oil. The less time they cook, the better. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Some pirates catch fish instead of ships. The problem is known as illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Such fishing harms the productivity of fisheries and hurts developing countries especially. The fish pirates can easily land in ports that are not well controlled. Then they sell their catch at prices too low for the local fishing industry to compete. The catch may enter international markets, yet rob communities of needed food and raise the risk of fishery collapse. In November, the Governing Conference of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization approved a new treaty. The agreement, once it takes effect, will be the first under international law to target this problem. It has a long name, the Agreement on Port-State Measures to Prevent, Deter, and Eliminate Illegal, Unreported, and Unregulated Fishing. The FAO says that by signing the treaty, governments promise to take steps to guard their ports against ships involved in such fishing. The behavior of a fishing boat is mainly the responsibility of the nation whose flag it flies. The new treaty is directed at countries where fishing ships enter port. The aim is to get the countries to identify, report, and deny entry to offending vessels. To land, foreign fishing ships will have to request permission from ports that are able to inspect them. And before they arrive, they will have to send information on their activities and the fish they are carrying. If a ship is denied entry, other ports will be told, and the nation whose flag it is sailing under must take action. The agreement will take effect once 25 countries have ratified it into law after signing it. 11 members of the Food and Agriculture Organization immediately signed the treaty. They included Angola, Brazil, Chile, the European Union, Indonesia, and Iceland. The others were Norway, Samoa, Sierra Leone, the United States, and Uruguay. Activists with the Pew Environment Group say countries should use the measures even before the treaty takes effect. The group notes that a past fishing treaty took almost 10 years to come into force. But the director of international law programs at Southern Illinois University is more hopeful. Cindy Buys thinks the treaty might take effect in only about a year. But she points out that the success of the treaty depends on the ability of nations to enforce it. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. Thanksgiving Day is a national holiday that Americans celebrate on the fourth Thursday in November. This autumn festival is traditionally celebrated with family and friends over a big meal that takes hours to prepare. The meal usually includes turkey, served along with dishes like cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, green beans, and pumpkin pie. The turkey is usually seasoned and roasted in an oven, but some people fry the bird in oil or cook it on a grill. The National Turkey Federation estimates that Americans ate 46 million of the birds during last year's holiday. About 2/3 of the turkeys raised in America came from 6 states: Minnesota, North Carolina, Arkansas, Missouri, Virginia, and Indiana. Turkey is eaten all year, not just during the holidays. Americans have been consuming an increasing amount of turkey, although chicken, beef, and pork are still more popular. One industry official says 2012 will not be as profitable for turkey farmers as past years have been. Feed costs are up, while turkey prices are about the same. The Pilgrim's Feast in 1621 is often considered the nation's first Thanksgiving. The Pilgrims were early settlers of the Plymouth colony in what is now Massachusetts. They held a 3-day feast to celebrate a good harvest. During the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln declared the last Thursday of November a national day of Thanksgiving. As the Great Depression was ending, President Franklin Roosevelt established the holiday on the month's 4th Thursday. He did not want to shorten the Christmas holiday shopping season in years when November has a 5th Thursday, as it did this year. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. For American soldiers, the move from the military to civilian life is not always easy. Military veterans have a 35% unemployment rate. This is more than 3 times the national average. And an estimated 100,000 veterans are homeless. The federal government and private organizations offer programs to help veterans. One private program is called Archie's Acres. It is on a 2-hectare farm in Southern California. Marine Sergeant Colin Archiplay returned to the United States after serving 3 tours of duty in Iraq. He and his wife, Karen, bought a farm in Southern California. They produce organic, hydroponic crops. They grow their tomatoes, lettuce, and basil in pure water instead of in soil. Karen Archiplay says her husband wanted to share the peace he found on his farm with other veterans. So, the Archiplays worked with the local Veterans Administration office. They wanted to help returning troops translate their leadership skills to private business. Archie's Acres is helping combat veterans become agricultural business owners. Colin Archiplay is expanding his program to teach business skills. And he plans to include active troops who are ending their service. He notes that many veterans suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. This is made worse when they cannot find jobs and become homeless. He believes that the rate of PTSD would drop if soldiers could spend their last few months in the military learning skills so they could get jobs. In his new 6-week program, Colin Archiplay will teach agricultural skills from planting to harvest. Karen Archiplay will teach marketing. Educators from the Small Business Administration are also involved. They will teach classes on how to operate a business. Colin Archiplay does not expect veterans completing the program will have any problems finding work. He hopes to expand his program to serve veterans on the East Coast. He is also planning to make his 6-week course available online, so anyone in the military, anywhere, can take the classes. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can find scripts, podcasts, and MP3s on our website, voaspecialenglish.com. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes at VOA Learning English. This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. In 1621, a big celebration took place at Plymouth Colony in what is now the state of Massachusetts. European settlers known as the Pilgrims were celebrating their autumn harvest after a winter of struggle. Other colonists held earlier ceremonies of thanks. But the Pilgrims' 3-day feast is often called the nation's first Thanksgiving. President Abraham Lincoln declared a national holiday in 1863 during the Civil War. Today, families and friends gather on the 4th Thursday in November. And, thanks to the United States Census Bureau, here are some facts about where their Thanksgiving meal comes from. The main dish is traditionally a turkey. About 2/3 of the nation's turkeys are produced in Minnesota and 5 other states. Producers are expected to raise 248 million birds this year, 2% more than last year. Popular side dishes include cranberries and sweet potatoes. Last year, North Carolina grew more sweet potatoes than any other state. Wisconsin is expected to be the top cranberry producer this year. People often finish the meal with pumpkin pie. Last year, Illinois grew the most pumpkins. California, New York, and Ohio were also major pumpkin producers. Thanksgiving is a big event, but buying a traditional holiday meal can be a struggle for the poor. So charity groups often hold food drives. In Denver, Colorado, volunteers were collecting donated items to fill 1,500 Thanksgiving baskets. Rodney Cunningham has been helping the group Volunteers of America for 3 years. He says this year the demand was greater than ever. One of the reasons why it's really important is because the economy is pretty bad and a lot of people have a need for extra food. They don't have any food at all. Jim White, Community Affairs Director at Volunteers of America, says people donated a lot of food. These individuals donated over 148 tons of food, but it takes a huge amount of food, as you can imagine, to do 1,500 food baskets complete with stuffing and cranberries and pumpkin and fresh produce, and then they are all topped off with a 15-pound frozen turkey. Mr. White says volunteers come from all over Denver to help. Thanksgiving should be viewed as a verb, not a noun. And what better way to give thanks than to help somebody out that you know is struggling right now? For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. Severe food shortages in the Sahel area of Africa have affected 18 million people in 9 countries this year. This was the third severe food crisis in 4 years in the area south of the Sahara Desert. How can the Sahel break its cycle of food insecurity? Aid workers are asking that question as this year's emergency eases. David Gressley is the United Nations Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for the Sahel. He says during a crisis, families eat just 1 or 2 meals a day. They take their children out of school, and they sell their animals and go into debt. These actions put them at greater risk in a future crisis. In fact, many of the families affected by this year's food crisis have yet to recover from earlier ones. Aid agencies sent food and emergency assistance. They supplied farmers with drought-resistant seeds, improved fertilizers, and medicines for livestock. Aid groups also worked to improve irrigation systems and grain storage. These measures dealt with short-term needs, but David Gressley says the work should not stop when the crisis eases. He says there is a need for targeted programs for these 18 million people. He says the programs should find ways to avoid crises so that people do not put their futures at risk just to survive. Aid groups say they are working to build the resilience of communities, to make them stronger during a crisis. David Gressley says this means taking steps like reducing child malnutrition and changing cultural practices that may be harmful. Building the resilience of poor people also means investing in food reserves and social protections like health care. Aid groups say prevention costs less than treatment. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report in Special English. The humanitarian situation in Somalia has improved. United Nations officials say the improvement is the result of new methods of aid delivery, more rainfall, and success against militants. Luca Alanovi is head of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization for Somalia. He says the situation has changed in a sustainable way. But he says those gains are at risk if the international community fails to support the Somali people. He warns of a possible return to conditions like those in 2011. That was when a famine emergency was declared in parts of Somalia. Many people died. Many others walked for weeks to reach areas with food and water. Luca Alanovi says the FAO used cash-based interventions to help during the famine and the season after it. He says the aid effort urged Somalis to stay where they were. Earlier interventions, he says, were based more on simply providing food, shelter, and other basic needs. 2012 was a good year for rainfall in Somalia. 2 major rivers cross the country, so irrigation can be used in a lot of areas. Luca Alanovi says continued investment in irrigation could increase agricultural production to meet the needs of more than half of Somalia. Another issue affecting the humanitarian situation has been the success against the militant group Al-Shabaab. Forces from the African Union, known as AMISOM, along with those from the Somali government and Kenya, have driven militants from many areas. But Luca Alanovi says many rural areas remain under Al-Shabaab's control, and the military operation continues. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Trees and plants are called ornamentals if their main job is to add beauty and interest to a garden. Dogwood trees, for example, are a popular ornamental in parts of the United States. They produce white or pink blooms in the spring. Cherry and plum trees can also add beauty to landscaping, even if they never produce fruit. Ornamental trees and bushes or shrubs can serve other useful purposes besides just looking good. Some also smell good and can be used to make scented oils, for example, lavender and lilac. Ornamentals can be used to mark the border of a property or to provide privacy from neighbors. They can be used to hide trash cans and storage sheds. Most ornamentals have the same needs as other plants: water, mulch, pruning for shape, and inspection for pests. But Master Gardener Bob Orazi says most of them take care of themselves after the first 6 months. Bob Orazi is a horticultural advisor in Howard County, Maryland. Years of experience have shown him that people often decide to plant an ornamental bush when they see one in bloom. They might see the yellow blooms on a forsythia bush, one of the first signs of spring, and decide to plant one. But he says most ornamentals are better to plant just before their leaves open. Some ornamentals and other plants are sold with their roots in a ball of dirt held together with burlap. But David Robson of the University of Illinois Extension says more and more plants are grown in containers. They are easier to ship that way. However, the roots may become encircled by growing around and around in the pot. So his advice is to pull the plant out of the container, then cut the bottom half of the root ball into 4 parts. This process is known as butterflying. The bottom of the root ball will look something like the spread open wings of a butterfly. David Robson says planting the root ball this way will produce much faster growth on a tree or shrub. But you have to remember that by butterflying, you are cutting down the overall height of the root ball. So his suggestion is to butterfly it first, then measure how tall the root ball is before digging the hole. Make sure not to dig too deep. The plant should not be sitting below the soil line. Another suggestion is not to let shrubs grow taller than 4.5 meters. If some shrubs get too tall, he says, they start losing their ability to produce good flowers. In that case, your ornamental plant might not be so ornamental. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For more gardening advice, go to voaspecialenglish.com. This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Foreign investment in African land is growing. Countries like China, Saudi Arabia, and South Korea are leasing or buying millions of hectares to grow food for their people. Research shows that many large land deals lack protections for small farmers. Contracts may guarantee leases for up to 99 years, leaving local people without land for generations. Better practices balance exports with local food needs and give farmers ways to enforce promises by investors. They also make clear what kinds of jobs and how many jobs will be created. Smallholders can gain influence if they form cooperatives or unions, or have the support of non-governmental organizations. There are different business models for cooperation between investors and local farmers. Lorenzo Cotula is a senior researcher at the International Institute for Environment and Development in London. One popular method, says Mr. Cotula, is contract farming. Contract farming has been around for a very long time, and which essentially involves a company providing credit, inputs like seeds and fertilizers and training and all that, and then buying produce from the farmers at a fixed price when harvest time comes. Companies usually deduct the cost of the inputs from the final purchase price. He says contract farming represents up to 60% of tea and sugar farming in Kenya and 100% of cotton farming in Mozambique. Contract farming may give farmers more access to markets for high-value crops. But Mr. Cotula found that contracts often go to wealthier farmers. Poorer farmers often work as labor on the contracted farms. The price that companies pay to farmers may be low, and companies might not honor purchase agreements when market conditions change. Also, growers may go into debt when the company deducts payments for inputs from the final purchase price. Another business model is a joint venture. Lorenzo Cotula says an equity stake or share of ownership in a business can give communities a voice in decision-making. It can also provide income in the form of dividend payments. But a practice called transfer pricing can make those dividends disappear. Prices are inflated or deflated in deals with companies linked to the partner in the joint venture. This practice reduces profits for the joint venture company and dividends for smallholder partners. As a solution, contracts may require fair market prices for sales to partners. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Kenyan farmers say a British ban on the plant known as cot will seriously affect their businesses and economy. Exports of cot, also called miraa, are worth a lot of money to Kenya. The farmers have exported the plant mainly to European countries and Somalia. Cot is grown in the colder climates of central Kenya. For years, people have been using it as a drug. Chewing the leaves of the plant can increase the heartbeat and make a person feel more awake. Some Kenyan politicians and khat traders have called on the government to open talks with British officials to convince them to cancel the ban on khat. They say ending the ban would save Kenya's khat industry from collapse. Kipkorir Menjo is the director of the Kenya Farmers Association. He says the ban will affect tens of thousands of people. In July, British Home Secretary Theresa May banned the leafy stimulant. She warned that traders could use Britain to move khat illegally to other European countries. Khat is already banned in most European countries, including France, Germany, and the Netherlands. Kenyan traders exported about 20 tons of khat to the Netherlands weekly before the ban. Another 36 tons a week was sent to Britain. Kipkorir Menjo says khat farmers and traders need to speak up so that Britain can lift the ban. As the farmers and traders study the latest developments in Europe, another battle awaits them inside Kenya. The National Authority for the Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse is urging the government to list khat as an illegal drug. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.